Long before humans built pyramids, wrote epic poems, or invented the wheel, they were experimenting with plants, fruits, and fungi in ways that would surprise most of us today. Imagine our ancestors, hunched over a strange, fermenting puddle of fruit, taking a tentative sip and thinking, this makes my head spin, but it feels interesting." That was the beginning of a relationship with intoxication that has persisted for thousands of years, shaping societies, religions, and even wars. Archaeological evidence suggests that the earliest known alcoholic beverages date back at least 9,000 years. In the Yellow River Valley of ancient China, pottery jars from 70,006,600 BCE contained residues of a fermented concoction made from rice, honey, and fruit, essentially an ancient cocktail. Meanwhile, in the Middle East, the Sumerians were brewing beer from barley as early as 4000 BCE. They even wrote hymns to Ninkasi, the goddess of beer, highlighting how deeply entwined intoxication was with culture and spirituality. This wasn't just a recreational habit, it was a social glue, a medicinal tool, and a gateway to altered states of consciousness. But alcohol wasn't the only path to feeling lifted. Ancient peoples discovered a wide array of psychoactive plants, cannabis, datura, poppies, and various mushrooms that could induce altered perceptions, visions, or euphoria. In China, hemp fibers were used not only for ropes and clothing, but also for ritual inhalation of smoke. In India, texts from the Vedic period describe soma, a mysterious, mind-altering plant used in religious ceremonies. Shamans, priests, and healers across cultures experimented with these substances, seeking divine insight, healing, or spiritual transcendence. Intoxication often had religious or ritual significance. The ancient Egyptians, for example, celebrated festivals with wine and beer, sometimes using intoxication to connect with the gods. They believed that certain levels of drunkenness could open a person to divine communication, a concept echoed in other cultures worldwide. The Greeks followed suit, with Dionysus, the god of wine and ecstasy, embodying both the joy and danger of intoxication. Philosophers debated the balance between pleasure and excess, acknowledging the powerful effects of substances on the mind. Early humans didn't just drink or smoke for fun, they were experimenters and observers. Fermentation may have been discovered accidentally, yet its effects were quickly studied and refined. Pottery vessels reveal careful methods of brewing and storing fermented liquids, while ancient texts indicate recipes for beverages designed to produce specific effects, from mild relaxation to intense inebriation. Even in pre-literate societies, people understood cause and effect. Drink this fermented barley, and you feel lighter, braver, or more social. It was the birth of psychopharmacology, long before the word even existed. Interestingly, intoxication also had practical benefits. Fermented drinks provided safe hydration, especially in times when water sources could be contaminated. Alcohol was also a source of calories in lean times, making it not merely recreational, but a functional part of survival. Meanwhile, psychoactive plants were sometimes used medicinally for pain relief, sleep induction, or treating infections. Early humans were learning, quite intuitively, that altering consciousness could serve multiple purposes: social, spiritual, medicinal, and even strategic. Of course, not all experiments went smoothly. Ancient records hint at overindulgence, hallucinations, and misadventures, demonstrating that humans quickly learned the line between euphoria and danger. Communities developed rituals, moderation rules, and moral frameworks to manage these powerful substances. Even 9,000 years ago, societies had to grapple with the human tendency to go too far, a problem remarkably familiar to us today. Once humans discovered fermentation, the world changed in ways that were both practical and, frankly, a little wild. Imagine walking through a bustling Sumerian city around 4000 BCE, where taverns were filled with people sipping beer, sharing gossip, and singing songs to the goddess Ninkasi. Beer wasn't just a drink, it was food, medicine, and social glue all at once. The Sumerians even had a hymn dedicated entirely to the art of brewing, describing beer making as a divine gift that nourished the body and spirit alike. Alcohol in ancient civilizations wasn't a casual indulgence, it was a cultural cornerstone. In Egypt, wine was a staple at religious ceremonies, banquets, and festivals. Pharaohs and priests believed that wine could connect them to the gods, while ordinary citizens used it for celebration, healing, or even mild intoxication to relieve the burdens of daily life. Interestingly, in some tombs, archaeologists have found large jars of wine buried alongside the dead, suggesting that Egyptians thought a touch of intoxication and accompany the soul into the afterlife. That's commitment to a good buzz, if nothing else. Meanwhile, in Greece, wine became a symbol of civilization itself. The symposium, a ritualized drinking party, combined philosophy, politics, poetry, and entertainment, illustrating that intoxication was not merely recreational, it was intellectually and socially transformative. Wine was diluted with water, a practice designed to prevent outright drunkenness, while still allowing participants to enter a relaxed, contemplative state. Dionysus, the god of wine and ecstasy, represented both the pleasure and chaos that intoxication could bring, reminding Greeks that moderation was an art form. Rome took things to a new level. Wine was ubiquitous, and the Romans mastered storage, transport, and blending techniques that allowed alcohol to reach all corners of the empire. From soldiers to senators, wine was woven into daily life, used to celebrate victories, mark religious festivals, or soothe the weary after a long day. Soldiers received wine rations to maintain morale, and generals understood that a mild buzz could sometimes turn fear into controlled bravery on the battlefield. At the same time, overindulgence could cause chaos. Banquets occasionally ended in brawls, poisoning incidents, or diplomatic embarrassment. The Romans knew that intoxication was powerful and potentially dangerous, a lesson echoed throughout history. Across the Mediterranean and into Asia, fermentation took different forms, but served similar purposes. In China, rice wine was consumed in rituals and daily life, often linked to ancestor worship and festivals. Texts from the Song and Zhou dynasties describe elaborate ceremonies where intoxication was considered a path to divine communication and inspiration. Meanwhile, in India, the Vedic texts describe soma, a mysterious, intoxicating plant used in sacred rituals. The effects of soma were both spiritual and euphoric, designed to lift priests into altered states of consciousness for religious insight. Even in Mesoamerica, long before European contact, civilizations discovered local plants that could induce euphoria, visions, or trance-like states. Fermented beverages made from maize, honey, and fruits were common, often combined with psychoactive herbs. The Mayans and Aztecs integrated these substances into religious ceremonies, using intoxication to bridge the human and divine realms. The line between celebration, ritual, and medicinal use was blurry, reflecting an understanding that altered consciousness had many practical and spiritual applications. What's fascinating is that ancient peoples were remarkably experimental and observant. They noticed patterns, Some drinks made you sleepy, others energized or emboldened you. Some plants induced visions, others soothed pain. Recipes were refined, rituals codified, and social norms established to maximize the benefits while minimizing risks. It's as if humanity collectively invented psychoactive pharmacology long before chemistry classes existed. Alcohol also served practical purposes. Beer and wine were safer than water in many regions, providing hydration and nutrition. Soldiers, laborers, and ordinary citizens could sustain themselves with fermented beverages, combining caloric intake with mild intoxication. Alcohol could calm nerves, facilitate social interaction, and even improve morale during long campaigns or difficult labor. It wasn't just fun, it was functional. However, ancient civilizations were also aware of the risks of overconsumption. Laws, religious prohibitions, and social norms often discouraged excess. Ancient Egyptian texts, Greek philosophers, and Roman satirists all warn about drunkenness leading to disorder, poor judgment, or shame. Societies learn to balance indulgence with restraint, a theme that persists in human culture today. While fermented drinks like beer and wine were widespread, humans also discovered smoke, herbs, and plants that could alter the mind in dramatically different ways. Long before tobacco made its way across the Atlantic, or marijuana became a modern recreational substance, ancient peoples were experimenting with cannabis, datura, morning glory, and other psychoactive plants, often in deeply spiritual or ritual contexts. This wasn't just about getting high, it was about accessing altered states of consciousness, connecting with the divine, and exploring the mysteries of the mind. Cannabis, for example, has been found in archaeological sites dating back thousands of years in China and Central Asia. Residue analysis from ancient pottery shows that it was burned in ceremonial fires, often inside temples or sacred spaces. Shamans, priests, and healers inhaled the smoke to induce trance states, visions, and spiritual insight, seeing it as a bridge between the human and supernatural realms. The ritual use of cannabis was more than recreational, it was a tool for guidance, prophecy, and connection with the cosmos. In India, sacred texts describe the use of soma, a mysterious plant whose psychoactive effects were highly prized by priests. The exact identity of soma remains debated among scholars, but its role was clear. It enabled communication with the gods, heightened perception, and inspired ritual ecstasy. Consuming soma was often a carefully controlled practice, with preparation and dosage dictated by tradition, showing that ancient peoples were astute observers of psychoactive effects long before modern pharmacology. The use of hallucinogenic herbs wasn't limited to Asia. In the Americas, indigenous peoples discovered peyote, psilocybin mushrooms, and other plants that could induce vivid visions. For the Aztecs and Mayans, these plants were central to shamanic rituals, divination, and initiation ceremonies. Shamans would consume these substances to journey into other realms, seek guidance for the community, or interpret dreams and omens. The experience was highly structured, with strict rules and symbolism, reflecting the serious and sacred nature of intoxication. Even in Europe, psychoactive plants had ceremonial significance. Datura, for example, was used by some Celtic and Germanic tribes in ritual contexts. Though dangerous in high doses, controlled consumption allowed ritual leaders to enter altered states, interpret messages from spirits, and advise their communities. Early humans were learning not only which plants had effects, but also how to use them safely and purposefully. Smoke, incense, and herbs were also combined with drinks or food to enhance effects. In some Mesopotamian and Egyptian texts, we see references to spiced wines or herbal infusions that created subtle intoxication or mild hallucinations. These combinations could be medicinal, recreational, or ritualistic, demonstrating that ancient societies were experimenting with synergistic effects long before chemistry existed. The social aspect of psychoactive herbs was as important as the individual experience. Group rituals created shared, altered states, strengthening cohesion, reinforcing hierarchy, and embedding spiritual experiences into the collective memory of the community. For shamans and priests, controlling the ritual use of these substances was a form of authority, giving them influence over both the spiritual and social life of the society. Interestingly, these early experiments reveal a remarkable human curiosity and systematic observation. Ancient peoples weren't merely seeking pleasure, they were documenting effects, standardizing dosages, and creating ceremonial frameworks. In essence, they were the first psychopharmacologists, learning through trial, error, and observation how different substances affected consciousness, perception, and behavior. Of course, the use of psychoactive plants carried risks. Overconsumption could cause confusion, illness, or even death. Communities developed taboos, laws, and ceremonial guidelines to minimize harm while maximizing insight. The balance between safety and spiritual or recreational benefit was carefully negotiated, a theme that continues in modern discussions about psychoactive substances. Once humans discovered that certain plants, fungi, and substances could alter perception, the world of ritual, religion, and cultural expression was transformed. Hallucinogens, psychoactive substances that created vivid visions, altered consciousness, or mystical experiences became central to many ancient societies. These substances were more than recreational, they were tools for spiritual exploration, divination, and understanding the unknown. In Mesoamerica, civilizations like the Aztecs, Maya, and Olmecs integrated hallucinogenic plants into religious life. Psilocybin mushrooms, often called magic mushrooms today, were considered sacred. Shamans and priests would consume these mushrooms during ceremonies to enter trance states, receive messages from the gods, or interpret the future. The rituals were highly structured. Participants followed strict dietary rules, chanted prayers, and often fasted to prepare the mind and body for the hallucinogenic experience. These sessions were not casual recreational events, they were profound spiritual practices that reinforced social order and cultural beliefs. Similarly, the peyote cactus played a central role in the rituals of indigenous peoples in North America. Peyote contains mescaline, a powerful hallucinogen that induces visual and auditory experiences. Tribes such as the Jical of Mexico believed that consuming peyote allowed them to communicate with ancestors and deities, guiding decisions about hunting, planting, and communal life. The ritual use of peyote was strictly regulated. It was reserved for religious or communal purposes, not personal indulgence, emphasizing the sacred nature of intoxication. Across the globe, hallucinogenic plants were used in ancient African and Asian societies. In parts of Africa, iboga and canna were used in initiation rites, spiritual healing, and divination. In Siberia and Central Asia, shamans used fly agaric mushrooms to enter altered states for guidance, healing, or communicating with spirits. Smoke, ingestion, and ritual chants were combined to create profoundly immersive experiences, blending sensory perception with cultural narrative. In addition to plant-based hallucinogens, ancient peoples often used fermented or infused beverages to enhance visions. Mesoamerican ritual drinks were sometimes brewed with hallucinogenic herbs, amplifying effects and allowing for longer, deeper trance states. In India, the Vedic Soma ritual combined preparation, consumption, and chanting to induce divine connection. Similarly, ancient Greeks sometimes used wine mixed with herbs in mystery cults to create psychological and sensory experiences that transcended ordinary perception. The social and cultural role of these substances cannot be overstated. Hallucinogens created shared experiences, reinforcing social cohesion and communal identity. Shamans or spiritual leaders who controlled access to these substances held significant power, guiding both spiritual life and decision-making. In this sense, psychoactive rituals were both religious and political instruments, ensuring order, cohesion, and cultural continuity. Ancient users also developed safety protocols and ceremonial structures to manage the risks. Hallucinogens could easily cause confusion, paranoia, or physical harm if misused. Communities established dietary restrictions, preparation methods, and strict guidelines for participation. Such rules reflected a sophisticated understanding of the potency of these substances, showing that ancient peoples were not only experimenting, but also observing, documenting, and refining their use. Interestingly, these hallucinogenic rituals often blurred the lines between religion, art, and science. Participants reported visions that inspired art, storytelling, and architecture. The intricate patterns in Mesoamerican temples, for instance, may reflect hallucinatory experiences, as could the vivid imagery in shamanic art across Siberia and Africa. Intoxication was not just a personal journey, it was a creative and cultural force, shaping the visual and symbolic language of civilizations. While psychoactive plants and hallucinogens were often reserved for ritual, sacred, or medicinal purposes, alcohol found its way onto the battlefield as both a tool and a morale booster. Ancient armies quickly realized that a carefully timed drink could steady nerves, embolden soldiers, and even influence the outcome of battles. Of course, the line between liquid courage and chaos was thin, and history provides countless examples of both. Let's start with the Sumerians and Egyptians, where beer and wine were staples in military rations. Soldiers marched long distances, carried heavy weapons, and faced the terrifying reality of combat. Providing a measure of fermented beverage served multiple purposes. It was caloric sustenance, hydration in regions with unsafe water, and a mild sedative to ease fear. Archaeologists have found clay vessels in Egyptian military camps containing remnants of beer and wine, suggesting that these drinks were considered essential battlefield tools. It wasn't about partying before the fight, it was about survival and performance. The Romans took this concept even further. Wine was distributed to soldiers, both as a daily ration and in moments of celebration or preparation. Some historians suggest that the famous Roman discipline and order were maintained despite alcohol consumption, thanks to strict regulations and careful monitoring. Yet even the disciplined Roman legions were not immune to the perils of overindulgence. Drunken errors in battle, miscommunication, and delays occasionally altered the outcomes of skirmishes and campaigns. The Romans understood an important principle: moderation was key, but the morale benefits were undeniable. Vikings provide another colorful example. These Nordic warriors were known, not just for their ferocity, but for the ritualistic consumption of mead before raids. Mead, a fermented honey drink, was believed to instill courage and reduce fear. While some might scoff at the idea of beer-fueled bravery, contemporary accounts suggest that a touch of intoxication could make soldiers more daring, cohesive, and psychologically ready for the horrors of combat. Of course, Overindulgence sometimes led to accidents or misjudgments, proving that alcohol on the battlefield was both friend and foe. Naval warfare, particularly in the age of sail, leaned heavily on alcohol. Sailors endured long, grueling voyages where fresh water was scarce. Alcohol, often in the form of rum, wine, or beer, served multiple functions. It provided hydration, prevented scurvy in some cases, and bolstered morale during monotonous or dangerous periods at sea. Naval traditions, like the British Navy's tot of rum, highlight how deeply ingrained alcohol was in military life. While the occasional intoxicated sailor might misfire a cannon or stumble on deck, the overall effect was enhanced endurance, bravery, and cohesion in crews facing extreme stress. Alcohol also influenced strategy and psychological warfare. Commanders understood that well-timed distribution of spirits could calm jittery troops, encourage bold charges, or help maintain morale in adverse conditions. Conversely, enemy forces sometimes used intoxication or its denial as a tactical tool, either by exploiting weakened defenses or attempting to disrupt the cohesion of opposing armies. This interplay shows that alcohol was not merely a personal indulgence, but a strategic element in human conflict. Interestingly, alcohol in warfare often blurred the line between medicine, ritual, and recreation. Soldiers might sip beer to soothe wounds, drink wine for courage, or indulge during celebrations after a victory. In some cultures, alcohol was even incorporated into ceremonial rites before combat, combining spiritual preparation with physical fortification. This dual role illustrates a profound understanding of human psychology. Intoxication could alter fear, pain perception, and risk tolerance, sometimes tipping the scales of battle. However, historical records are full of cautionary tales. Armies that overindulged suffered catastrophic consequences: missed orders, poor coordination, and vulnerability to enemy tactics. Ancient commanders learned that alcohol was a double-edged sword. It could inspire heroism or induce disaster. The careful balance between morale enhancement and operational efficiency became a recurring theme throughout military history, influencing how civilizations managed both soldiers and spirits. By the time humans had mastered both fermentation and the use of psychoactive plants, alcohol had become a critical component of military life, not only as sustenance, but as a psychological instrument. Ancient commanders and soldiers understood something modern psychologists are only now studying. Altered states of consciousness can change courage, perception, and risk tolerance. In short, alcohol could make a soldier fearless or recklessly foolish. Consider the Roman legions. Soldiers received daily wine rations, diluted with water to prevent over-intoxication, but just enough to calm nerves and sharpen social cohesion. Alcohol helped manage the intense stress of combat, providing a psychological buffer against fear and anxiety. Ancient writers noted that soldiers who drank in moderation could face overwhelming odds with greater composure, while excessive consumption often led to poor judgment, disorganization, or friendly fire incidents. Commanders learned quickly that the difference between a disciplined and a chaotic unit often came down to precise control of alcohol distribution. Vikings, on the other hand, embraced the ritualistic and symbolic aspect of drinking before battle. Mead, often consumed in ceremonial quantities, was believed to grant courage and even a touch of divine protection. Viking sagas abound with stories of warriors whose bravery or foolishness was attributed to mead. These narratives suggest that alcohol functioned not merely as a physiological stimulant, but as a cultural tool to instill confidence and camaraderie, creating a shared mental state that reinforced the bonds among warriors. Naval warfare provides another fascinating example of alcohol's psychological role. Sailors faced months at sea, monotonous labor, and the constant threat of storms or enemy attack. Rum, beer, and wine served as both comfort and stimulant, relieving tension while fostering social cohesion. Naval officers were acutely aware of alcohol's dual effect. While it could boost morale and cooperation, it also exacerbated fatigue, impaired judgment, and sometimes led to accidents. The careful rationing of spirits became a strategic necessity, balancing morale with operational efficiency. Alcohol also influenced decision-making in battle. Historical accounts reveal that commanders sometimes relied on mild intoxication to encourage bold action or maintain morale under pressure. Soldiers facing sieges, ambushes, or long marches could drink to steady their hands and nerves. Ancient military thinkers noted that the right dose could enhance alertness, focus, and bravery, while the wrong dose could result in chaos. This delicate balance highlights an early understanding of psychopharmacology applied to human conflict. Interestingly, alcohol's role extended beyond immediate combat. In victory celebrations, rations of wine or beer helped solidify camaraderie and loyalty. Post-battle rituals often included communal drinking, which reinforced social hierarchies, honored the fallen, and allowed soldiers to process trauma. In some cultures, intoxication was seen as a cathartic experience, helping warriors cope with the psychological toll of warfare. It's a reminder that humans have long used altered states of consciousness, not just for courage, but for emotional resilience. The lessons of history are clear. Alcohol was both a weapon and a tool, capable of shaping the minds of individuals and the cohesion of entire armies. From the Roman legions' disciplined wine rations to Viking mead rituals and naval run traditions, the psychological impact of alcohol was recognized, harnessed, and regulated. Leaders understood that morale, courage, and perception were just as critical as swords and shields, and alcohol provided a unique way to influence all three. Of course, the double-edged nature of alcohol was never ignored. Overindulgence led to strategic mistakes, battlefield mishaps, and social disorder, reinforcing the importance of moderation, ritual, and oversight. Ancient military cultures understood that, while alcohol could enhance performance, it required careful control to prevent disaster. This delicate interplay between human psychology, altered consciousness, and military effectiveness underscores the profound and enduring role of alcohol in warfare. As we move into the medieval and Renaissance periods, alcohol continued to play a critical role in warfare, shaping morale, strategy, and the daily life of soldiers. While the battlefields evolved castles, pikes, and gunpowder replacing swords and shields, the psychological and practical functions of alcohol remained remarkably consistent. In medieval Europe, beer and wine were staples for both armies and civilians. Foot soldiers often received daily rations of beer, sometimes as much as 2 to 3 liters per day, which might sound excessive today, but this was often weaker, low-alcohol beer, serving as both nutrition and hydration. In regions where water was unsafe, fermented beverages were the safest liquid available, making beer and wine essential for survival. Beyond the practical, alcohol was used to boost morale, helping soldiers endure long campaigns, harsh weather, and the ever-present threat of death in battle. Alcohol also had a strategic and ritualistic dimension. Before attacks or sieges, commanders sometimes organized communal drinking to instill courage and unity. Medieval chronicles recount armies drinking to bolster bravery, celebrate alliances, or honor fallen comrades. Wine and beer became psychological tools, turning fear into cohesion, anxiety into confidence. Leaders understood that an army's state of mind could be as decisive as the number of soldiers or the quality of weapons. The Renaissance period added new layers to this story. With the expansion of trade, spirits like brandy and distilled liquors became increasingly common among soldiers. Distilled alcohol was stronger, more portable, and sometimes easier to ration than beer or wine, making it an ideal companion for long campaigns. Armies in France, Spain, and Italy integrated spirits into their daily routines, using them to maintain morale, reward valor, or even encourage tactical daring. Some commanders, like those in the 30 Years' War, recognized that moderate consumption could sharpen nerves and foster daring maneuvers, while excess often led to disastrous consequences. Naval warfare during these eras leaned heavily on alcohol. Ships' crews endured months at sea under grueling conditions. Rum, brandy, and wine served multiple purposes: hydration, nutrition, and stress relief. Sailors drank to cope with monotony, fear, and homesickness, and the act of sharing a ration became a ritualized expression of camaraderie. Naval traditions, from British daily rum rations to Mediterranean wine distributions, highlight alcohol's enduring role as a psychological stabilizer in high-stress environments. Alcohol also influenced leadership and discipline. Commanders carefully monitored consumption, knowing that morale could be enhanced, but that overindulgence could compromise strategy. Chroniclers describe instances where intoxicated units failed to execute orders, missed key opportunities, or caused friendly fire incidents. Conversely, a controlled drink could inspire bold action, reduce hesitation, and strengthen group cohesion. The delicate balance between courage and chaos was well understood by military leaders, who treated alcohol as both a reward and a regulated tool. Interestingly, alcohol also affected post-battle rituals and social cohesion. After victorious engagements, armies celebrated with communal drinking, reinforcing hierarchies, honoring valor, and integrating new recruits into the group. Even in defeat, alcohol served as a means to process trauma and maintain morale, illustrating that human reliance on psychoactive substances extended beyond individual experience into collective psychology. Throughout medieval and Renaissance history, alcohol remained a double-edged sword. Properly managed, it bolstered morale, enhanced courage, and even served as a tactical advantage. Mismanaged, it could lead to strategic errors, disciplinary breakdowns, and unnecessary suffering. Commanders, soldiers, and chroniclers alike were keenly aware of this balance, reflecting a sophisticated understanding of psychology, chemistry, and human behavior, long before modern science codified these insights. As we move into the early modern period, roughly from the 16th to the 18th centuries, alcohol maintained its central role in the lives of soldiers, sailors, and even civilians caught up in war. The invention of distillation produced stronger spirits like rum, brandy, and whiskey, which were lighter to transport, longer lasting, and more potent than traditional beer or wine. This technological shift transformed not just how people drank, but how armies operated, soldiers behaved, and battles were fought. Consider the naval world of the 17th and 18th centuries. Ships were isolated 4 months at sea, with limited access to fresh water or fresh food. Fermented beverages had long been a hydration substitute, but spirits took on a strategic importance. The British Navy famously instituted the daily tot of rum, a precise ration designed to boost morale, provide energy, and create a shared ritual among sailors. Rum was used not only to lift spirits, but also to encourage courage during battle, calm nerves in storms, and even ease the monotony of long patrols. The act of sharing a ration became a unifying ritual, strengthening social cohesion and loyalty among crews. On land, European armies increasingly relied on spirits for rations and morale. Soldiers in campaigns across France, Spain, and the Americas consumed brandy, arak, or schnapps to sustain themselves on long marches, endure fatigue, and face fear head-on. Alcohol became a psychological instrument used by commanders to reduce hesitation, instill boldness, and maintain discipline. Accounts from the 30 Years' War, for example, describe units taking measured drinks before engagement to steady hands, ease anxiety, and reinforce group cohesion. Alcohol also had an undeniable ritual and celebratory function. After victories or the end of a grueling campaign, communal drinking ceremonies were a way to honor bravery, mourn the fallen, and reinforce social hierarchies. Even among irregular militias or mercenary bands, these rituals created shared mental states, binding soldiers together through shared intoxication and shared experience. In a world without modern psychology or morale research, alcohol became a tool to manage human emotions on a mass scale. However, early modern warfare also highlighted the risks of alcohol misuse. Stronger spirits meant that overindulgence could quickly spiral into chaos. Soldiers might become belligerent, undisciplined, or incapable of executing orders. Naval disasters sometimes involved crews incapacitated by alcohol at critical moments, demonstrating that, while alcohol could enhance bravery, it could just as easily undermine effectiveness. Commanders had to balance encouragement with strict rationing, understanding the fine line between courage and catastrophe. Alcohol's influence extended beyond immediate combat. Armies used it for healing minor injuries, soothing pain, and combating fatigue. Distilled spirits were sometimes used as antiseptics, sedatives, or simple nutritional supplements. On the battlefield, alcohol's dual role as both medicine and morale booster made it indispensable, revealing that human ingenuity often adapted psychoactive substances to serve multiple purposes simultaneously. Interestingly, the use of alcohol also intersected with cultural and social norms. Drinking rituals reinforced hierarchy, discipline, and group identity. Commanders who ignored these dynamics risked not only operational failure, but also eroding the loyalty of their troops. Conversely, those who understood how to incorporate alcohol wisely could foster courage, solidarity, and a sense of purpose, proving that alcohol was both a social glue and a psychological tool. As history progressed into the colonial era and revolutionary conflicts of the 17th and 18th centuries, alcohol continued to be an indispensable part of military life. Soldiers, sailors, and militia members relied on beer, wine, and spirits not only to survive harsh conditions, but also to maintain morale, courage, and cohesion. Across continents, from the Americas to Asia, Europe, and Africa, alcohol remained a psychological and strategic instrument on the battlefield. In the American colonies, for instance, alcohol was integrated into the daily rations of both militias and regular troops. Beer and rum were common, providing hydration, calories, and a mild sense of courage before facing enemy forces. Revolutionary leaders understood the dual nature of alcohol. It could inspire bravery, ease tension among troops, and facilitate camaraderie, but it could also fuel recklessness. Orders had to be carefully enforced, and rations closely monitored, demonstrating an early appreciation for the psychological impact of intoxication in warfare. Naval warfare again highlights alcohol's enduring role. European ships, transporting troops across oceans, or engaging in long-term blockades, relied on spirits to sustain crews. Rum, brandy, and wine served as both nourishment and morale boosters, especially when water supplies became unsafe or spoiled. Sailors developed sophisticated routines around alcohol consumption, balancing daily rations with duties and maintaining discipline through careful regulation. The grog tradition, combining rum with water and sometimes citrus to prevent scurvy, is a prime example of alcohol serving both practical and psychological purposes. Alcohol also influenced the ritual and social culture of armies. After battles or successful campaigns, soldiers celebrated with communal drinking, honoring heroism and bonding over shared hardship. Even in revolutionary movements, such as during the American Revolution or European uprisings, alcohol played a role in cementing trust, loyalty, and group identity. Leaders understood that morale could be a decisive factor. A well-bonded, confident, and slightly emboldened force often outperformed numerically superior but demoralized opponents. Yet the risks of alcohol misuse were ever present. Overindulgence could lead to chaos in camps, missed orders, and strategic mistakes. Colonial administrators and military leaders were acutely aware of the dangers posed by soldiers who drank too much, whether in the field or during post-battle celebrations. Regulations, disciplinary codes, and ration controls became common to ensure that alcohol's benefits were maximized while minimizing its hazards. This balance between encouragement and restraint reflects a sophisticated understanding of human behavior long before modern psychology emerged. Beyond the battlefield, alcohol played a subtle but profound role in cross-cultural encounters during colonization. European soldiers and settlers introduced spirits to indigenous populations, sometimes as part of trade, negotiation, or coercion. The effects of these introductions were dramatic, reshaping social dynamics, alliances, and even military strategies in both subtle and devastating ways. Alcohol was thus not just a battlefield tool, but also a cultural and political instrument, influencing the outcomes of wars and colonization alike. In medical contexts, alcohol served multiple purposes. Soldiers used it as a painkiller, antiseptic, or anti-fatigue remedy, and field surgeons sometimes relied on spirits to dull pain during amputations or wound treatment. In this way, alcohol became a multifunctional tool, bridging the gap between survival, courage, and human ingenuity in extreme circumstances. As we reach the conclusion of our journey through history, it becomes clear that humans have long been fascinated by altered states of consciousness, from fermented beverages to hallucinogenic plants, from sacred rituals to the battlefield. Psychoactive substances have profoundly shaped culture, society, and human behavior. But beyond the obvious effects, intoxication, euphoria, or hallucination, there is a deeper story, one of ingenuity, adaptation, and observation. Alcohol, for example, was never just a drink. In ancient Sumer, beer was a staple of daily life and religious practice. In Rome, wine was distributed to soldiers and integrated into ritual and celebration. Across Europe, Africa, Asia, and the Americas, fermented beverages became tools of survival, morale, and social cohesion. They nourished bodies, steadied nerves, and, perhaps surprisingly, contributed to the psychological resilience of warriors, workers, and civilians alike. Similarly, psychoactive plants like cannabis, soma, peyote, and psilocybin mushrooms were much more than recreational indulgences. Shamans, priests, and healers used them with precision, carefully observing their effects and developing rituals dosages, and ceremonial frameworks. The purpose was rarely trivial. These substances were tools for communication with the divine, insight, and guidance. Ancient humans were conducting sophisticated experiments in psychopharmacology long before science formalized the field. Hallucinogens, in particular, played a central role in ritual, art, and social cohesion. Mesoamerican mushroom ceremonies, Siberian shamanic rituals, and Vedic Soma practices all show that humans have long sought to explore consciousness and the unknown. The visions, altered perceptions, and emotional experiences produced by these substances were woven into cultural narratives, religious beliefs, and artistic expression. Intoxication was thus not only a personal journey, but also a shared cultural experience, reinforcing social structures and spiritual understanding. Alcohol in warfare demonstrates another dimension of human ingenuity. From Sumerian soldiers to Roman legions, Viking raiders to early modern navies, commanders understood that intoxication could alter fear, boost courage, and strengthen cohesion. At the same time, mismanagement could lead to disaster, forcing leaders to develop strategies for rationing, moderation, and psychological control. The lesson is clear. Humans have long recognized the power of psychoactive substances to influence behavior, both individually and collectively. Throughout history, the use of these substances reflects a fundamental human desire to explore, enhance, and cope with reality. Psychoactive plants and fermented beverages were tools for survival, social cohesion, religious experience, artistic inspiration, and psychological resilience. Ancient peoples learned to balance benefit and risk, often through ritual, observation, and cultural norms. This balance demonstrates a sophisticated understanding of human nature and the subtle ways in which substances interact with mind and body. Moreover, the story of psychoactive substances is also a story of creativity and adaptation. Recipes for beer and wine were refined over millennia. Hallucinogenic plants were prepared and administered with care. Rituals and ceremonies codified methods to maximize benefit while minimizing harm. Humans have been experimenting, observing, and innovating with psychoactive substances for thousands of years, driven by curiosity, necessity, and the search for a meaning. In modern terms, we might look back and call it early psychopharmacology or applied psychology, but the essence is timeless. Humans have always sought to understand and influence consciousness, whether for spiritual insight, physical courage, emotional relief, or social bonding. Psychoactive substances have been an integral part of our story. In conclusion, the history of humans getting high from ancient beer halls to sacred rituals, from battlefield rations to hallucinogenic ceremonies teaches us something profound. Our relationship with mind-altering substances is deeply intertwined with survival, culture, and creativity. These substances are not merely indulgences or vices, they are tools, teachers, and catalysts for human ingenuity. They reveal our timeless curiosity, our desire to connect with something larger than ourselves, and our unending quest to explore the vast, complex landscape of consciousness. Through the millennia, humans have learned that the mind is not only a tool for survival, but also a canvas for exploration, and psychoactive substances carefully studied, ritualized, and respected have been one of the most powerful instruments in that lifelong journey.